And we are live, guys. Akil, we are live.
What is up, everybody? Welcome.
Hi. This is exciting.
Well,
Awesome, guys. So we're just going to give it like 2 or 3 minutes while we wait for a couple of people to stream in.
And we are live, guys. Oops,
Awesome.
I heard myself.
That's because I was playing you here on my side. Guys, we want to play a song while we wait for 3 minutes. Can we get like a recommendation in the chat? Any song that you guys want to listen to right now while we just wait for like 2 or 3 minutes? I don't see any requests coming
that's
in.
a right regard.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put that in. Okay, there's a lot of requests. I'm just gonna go with the first one.
Awesome. We've got 38 views right now. And we have Bogdan, Margot, Mandir, Ignacio, Rory in the room. How's it going, guys?
Shout out to everybody in the house. Welcome. We're just waiting for like 2 minutes before we get started. Well, I'm loving the engagement, guys. This is brilliant. I'm just gonna give a shout out to a few people. Ignacio, shout out to Ignacio, Bogdan, Alexei, nice to see you guys here. Isaac, Akshay, Margot.
Can we do a fast clubbing night in this 3 minutes, guys? I know we all miss it.
Definitely miss the clubbing. I wonder how things are in the UK, guys, but it's been ages since I've gone clubbing.
Well, people are going clubbing anyways, I think.
Cool. So it's 5 past now. Loving the energy in the chat, guys. Awesome. It's 5 past. Harjot, what do you say? Should we get started?
Get started. So
Yeah.
we'll allow you to screen and yeah, let's begin.
Let's do this, guys. Let's do this. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
I'm pumped right now. It's gonna be fun.
Great. I'm just gonna go into present mode.
That's the kind of energy you need to make this kind of thing work. Very welcome. That's right.
That's 100% true, guys. We thrive on this energy. And we are Zayo. Thank you so much for having us here. Shout out to all the DSC leads over here. We're going to do a brief introduction before we dive into the whole thing. But yeah, guys, we are here to do the Intro to Web Development series. We'll be going through web development, the basics of web development with purely HTML and CSS. We're not going to be covering JavaScript. And while doing this, you're not only going to learn the concepts, but you'll be learning how to build a $1 billion landing page and a $1 billion website like YouTube and the Netflix landing page. So this is going to be a really fun experience. We try to keep it as practical as possible throughout. And yeah, we're super keen to be here. So just a couple of introductions. So myself, guys, my name is Akhil. I was born in India, Hyderabad. I was brought up in Nairobi, Kenya, and I went to the University of Cape Town in Cape Town, South Africa, to pursue my undergrad in computer science and information systems. And yeah, I graduated and I met Harjot in South Africa, and we ended up starting Zayo together. And yeah, Harjot, over to you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so my name is Harjot Singh, and I was born in Blantyre, Malawi. So if you don't know where exactly Malawi, it's right near Mozambique, Zimbabwe, somewhere. It's a small country. Lake Malawi, it's beautiful. Yeah, I went to the University of Cape Town with Akila as well. We started Zayo together. We're super passionate web developers, and we love teaching web development. So yeah, that's me. And that's my Instagram handle right there. If you'd like to connect with me, yeah, please follow. We connect. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, guys, let's connect on Instagram. I mean, in the course of these workshops, we'll definitely get a little close. So it'll be love to get to know you guys. If you have questions, I'm sure a lot of you might end up having questions. You can always reach out to us on Instagram and just see what we're up to. And yeah, so basically, I'd like to hand over to the DSC leads who are with us in the Zoom call right now to also just give a brief intro and tell us the university they're from and the club they're representing.
Okay, I can go first. Hello, everyone. My name is Kapika. You can call me Pika, and I'm the DSC lead for the University of Southampton.
Maybe I should go next. So my name is Wang. I'm currently at the DSC lead at University of San Andrew. It's really nice to be here, and happy coding, guys.
Hello, guys. My name's Jeremy. I'm the lead for Loughborough University.
Hey guys, I'm Finn, and I'm the lead for the University of Manchester, and I'm really looking forward to the workshop, so enjoy.
Hi everyone, I'm Gosha, you can also call me Margaret. I'm from the University of Edinburgh.
Brilliant, awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for having us here. We're super excited for this, and let's move on. Great. So here's the agenda for what's going to go down today. So first, we're just going to do a little housekeeping, just set out some ground rules of how we're going to conduct this workshop. Then we'll be diving into the building blocks, the HTML, like what builds, what makes up the web. Like it's going to get the starting might be a little theoretical, and then slowly we're going to phase it into making it very practical. Like today you might not build much with Netflix, and then you'll see in the next one, it's just going to like exponentially grow, and you'll be mind blown with what's possible with just HTML and CSS. And then we'll be covering HTML basics, CSS basics, and then based on how it goes with the time, we'll talk about the next steps for the coming workshop. Okay. So yeah, just a little bit about Zayo, guys. So as you've seen, I'm wearing a Zayo shirt here. We have Harjot here, and we're both from Zayo. And basically what we do is we identify high potential talent. We make them industry ready and help them get a high paying job. So now we've been doing this for the past 3 years. We started off while we were at university. We've had over 500 iterations in our training programs. And that is why we're so passionate about this. And the reason why we're collaborating with all these DSCs all around the club, we'll basically be, we're just trying to grow our brand and build some exposure. So I see a comment in the chat, Alexei, no, we will be starting Netflix today. Don't get me wrong. We will be starting Netflix, but it's just not going to look like what you expect it to look. It's just going to look very bare bones, but we're going to get started with it today. Awesome. Cool. So Harjot, do you have anything to add here?
I think that's good. Let's get started, man. I'm super excited to get started.
Yeah, let's do this, guys. So the format of this workshop, it is a code along. Don't worry about downloading the starter code. We tried this with the US group and it did turn out to be a little confusing. Whatever links are needed, we will drop it in the chat and we'll help you guys as we code along, like how you should download the starter code. We know that a lot of you are beginners, so this is totally beginner friendly. And yeah, we want this to be a very engaging and interactive session. So if you guys are stuck at any point, please feel free to drop a question in the chat and we're happy to repeat any question. I mean, we're happy to repeat any concept again, because we want everyone to understand and walk away with good knowledge of whatever we're teaching, all right? So yeah, just a few notes. This is a crash course We won't be able to go through every single concept, but we will equip you with whatever you need to get started, okay? So by the end of this series, you will have built the Netflix landing page clone. And if time allows, we will also build the YouTube clone, right? I'm sure maybe in some of the marketing, you guys have probably seen Facebook. Don't worry about that. The thing is, we wanted to make it more Google oriented. So like, YouTube is a Google oriented product. And we'll see, like, we'll take it as it goes, because we want this to be adaptive. It depends on the questions that are asked as well. So most likely, definitely we'll be building the Netflix page. And if time allows, we'll also build a YouTube UI clone. And yeah, you'll just learn what's needed to build a landing page and an actual application worth $1 billion just using HTML and CSS, which is so beginner friendly. And also just a heads up, HTML and CSS is quite linked. It's quite intertwined. So you might find us mixing between the two quite a lot. So just watch out for that. And here's something, believe, #ABCD, anybody can dev, okay? So let's do this, guys. Let's jump. Right, okay. So let's do this, guys. Let's get started, okay? We're just going to move on. And we're going to start off with the building blocks, right? So this is something you need to know, like every website you see online is made up of the basic building blocks, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Now, HTML stands for the hypertext markup language, right? So hypertext meaning that it's normal text, but then it's actually marked up, right? So it might look slightly different from normal text. And all the content on websites comes from HTML. So whatever framework, I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of some advanced frameworks like React.js, AngularJS, like whatever frameworks are there, whatever website you go on, like right now you're on YouTube, everything starts from index.html, the HTML file, everything loads from HTML. Okay, so that's where it all begins. And here's the best part, like if you're an absolute beginner, this is really easy. It's the best for beginners to enter the world of programming. Even if you're not pursuing computer science, this is super easy. It's super easy to get your teeth stuck into this one, all right? Awesome, so CSS basically stands for cascading style sheets, and it's responsible for the look of the website, right? So here's a little analogy, right? So think of the human body, right? So HTML would be like the equivalent to a naked body, right? So it's like, it's naked, right? But if you add like some beautiful clothes to it, like, a nice hat, if you add a nice, you wear some nice shoes, you wear some nice, whatever clothes, amazing clothes, right? That is the CSS, right? It makes your websites look very attractive, basically, right? So the look of the website comes from CSS, whereas the elements, right? The original elements, like a heading, for example, that is just, that comes from HTML. And then you get to style the heading and make it look beautiful so that it's attractive, right? Like when you go on Netflix, when you go on a certain website, any company wants you to chill on the website, just scroll through it and look through it. And they'll do whatever they can to make the user experience very appealing. And that all comes through CSS, right? So it's things like the fonts, the colors, adding background colors, like, some have some beautiful gradiented colors, layouts, and so many more styles. Like CSS is so deep, like there's so much you can do with CSS, all right? And then one of the most important things is JavaScript, right? So JavaScript it brings in the dynamic aspect, right? So firstly, it's a programming language. I know you guys will probably be learning Java, C at university. Similarly, JavaScript is a language, and the main goal of JavaScript is to manipulate HTML and CSS. So if you want something interactive to happen on your website, for example, you go on your website, you see a beautiful sign in button. If you click on sign in, you want some sort of action to happen, right? And that's where JavaScript comes in. It allows you to add logic to your application. You can build many web apps with JavaScript. There's so many frameworks that are powered by JavaScript, like React. React.js is more of a library, but AngularJS is a framework which is used to build web applications, all based off JavaScript, right? Unfortunately, we cannot cover it in this workshop because it is a lot. But if you guys are keen, let us know. We'll be sending a feedback form at the end of this workshop. And I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on how we could conduct the coming workshops. Great. So honestly, you only need HTML, right? So what I mean by that is, let me actually open up the Netflix page and show you what I mean by this. So this is the beautiful landing page that we're going to be building, right? And you'll be surprised how simple it is actually. But I want to show you guys something mind-blowing, okay? So I have this little extension here. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to disable the styles, okay? And now you can see that we have no styles in this now. So when I say no styles, it's a naked website. You know, it's just HTML, right? So you can see that this is the Netflix logo. This is the background image that was in the background. And then you can see that this is the title, there's a subtitle, and then there's like the input box. You know, these are the elements, right? These are the different elements of this page. Now imagine Netflix is like, hey guys, I want you to subscribe for my service, and then they make you go on this kind of website, right? Like it's like it works. Like you'll get to see the information, right? You can see that unlimited movies, TV shows, and more. But it looks horrible, guys. Like let's be honest. Like CSS is extremely important to make it look elegant and attractive, right? But honestly speaking, you only need HTML. But CSS is what makes a site look extremely interesting, you know? Great. So having said that, let us jump into the nitty-gritties. All right. So let's talk about HTML basics. Okay. So, I mean, the cool thing about HTML, we already spoke briefly about it. It's really simple, right? It essentially tells the browser exactly what content we are writing. Okay. So, for example, headings, right? So on the Netflix landing page, we saw a couple of headings, we saw subheadings, we saw a paragraph. So it just tells the browser that, hey, I'm just going to be writing a heading here. I want a heading here. I want a paragraph here. You know, you can make font bold. You can make font italic. And then if you click on a certain link, you can allow some redirection to open to other pages. And then, for example, you have a nav bar at the top of the page. You have a footer at the bottom. So these are actually HTML elements, right? And then you have the body, which is where all the main content is, you know. It is really simple. It just essentially tells the browser what we are writing. So let's talk about the basic syntax. Syntax are like the rules of, you know, how you would go about writing HTML. So these tags, right? So everything is wrapped in tags to tell the browser what is what. So think of a book, right? So we'll get back to that. Don't worry if that just went over your head. We'll get back to that. Think of a book, right? So a book has a cover. So it has a cover page, and then it has a whole bunch of pages. And then each page has titles, subheadings, paragraphs, page numbers, etc. Right? So similarly, the cover, right? If we were to put this in HTML, the cover would be like this. This would be like the opening tag, and then that would be the closing tag, right? And then inside the cover, so that's the opening tag for the cover, that's the closing tag for the cover, and then that makes it an element, right? So the cover, it's a cover element, and the cover element is made up of a cover opening tag and a cover closing tag. So the tag is basically this fancy open angle bracket, and then the word cover, and then the closing angle bracket. And then the closing tag has an opening angle bracket / cover, and then closing angle bracket there. So don't stress about this. Like if it looks really complicated, we'll be using Visual Studio Code to program, and it does a lot of work for you in terms of, you know, opening the tags, closing the tags, and so on, right? But essentially, this would be the cover element made up of the cover opening tag and the cover closing tag. Now inside the cover, as we said, we have pages, right? So similarly, we'll have a page element with the page opening tag and a page closing tag. And then we can have multiple pages inside our cover, right? Inside our book, right? And then inside each page, we can have some more elements, right? We have a heading, we have subheading, we have paragraphs, right? So here's an example. So this is how we would say that we would tell the browser that, hey, I want to write a heading, right? So I'm just going to use this heading tag. I mean, this is not the right syntax, but this is just the example. We'll be diving into exactly what the elements look like. But basically, this is an example. So inside the cover element, we have the page element. Inside the page element, we have 3 elements here. We have the heading element that says COVID happens. And then the subheading element says, is it the end of the world? And then the paragraph element says, P for paragraph says, 2020 was great, then it all started, right? So that is an example of like, you know, this is just a little analogy as to how we would go about writing HTML, right? So essentially the tags are created using these angle brackets, right? So you have the opening angle bracket, closing angle bracket, and then inside of that you have, the paragraph tag, for example. P stands for paragraph, right? And then every tag, every element has a closing tag. So just assume that for now. There are a few elements that do not have a closing tag. We will specify that in the coming slides. And essentially to close a tag, we have to just add the / like that. So if we were to open the paragraph tag like this, we would close it like this. So we'd have the opening tag, / P, and then the closing tag. So everything from the opening and the closing tag is called an element, right? Elements define our content in the browser. For example, we get to specify that this is a heading, this is a subheading, and so on, right? Awesome. So let's do this. Let's take this to our code editor, right? So what I'll do first things first is I'm going to drop a link in the chat right now. We actually dropped it at the beginning of the session, but we're just going to drop it again now. So that is the link. It's called this GitHub link, right? Don't worry about GitHub and Git. You don't have to know about that yet. I'm just going to pull this here. So I'm just opening that link that I've dropped in the chat. So please click on that link. Okay. And then what you do is you download the code, right? And what you can do is you can just say download the zip, right? So you can click on download zip, and that's going to download the code for you. And once it's downloaded, right, just click on it. And it'll unbox it for you. Unzip it, sorry. And then you'll have access to this, this folder, right? And it'll say master at the end there. And just make sure that you have VS Code installed, right? So I'm just gonna put the link to VS Code here. So it should take just a couple of minutes to install it. It's really, really lightweight, very convenient, can be done on the fly. So just dropping this in the chat as well. And yeah, like it depends on whatever OS you guys are using, like Windows, Ubuntu, or Mac, right? So I would download the Mac, and if you have Windows, just download the Windows. Okay, great. And then once you have it installed, you'll be able to access it. Like you can open Visual Studio Code, and then what you can do is once you open it. So I'm just going to say new window. Guys, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat if you do not understand anything. So you'll see that it'll open like this. Yours might look slightly different. I did some fancy styling to my thing. Doesn't make a difference. And what you can do is you can say open, right? So it'll open that project for you. And then it's going to be in your downloads, most likely. And then you can click on that. And then you can click on open. And it'll open the code for you. All right. So what's over here is we just have a couple of assets. Like we have a background image, we have the Netflix logo. We just have a couple of things over here. And yes, what I'll do now is I'm just going to close this, right? But essentially that's how you would open your code editor. And the thing is I already have mine open over here. Okay. So you can see that I just have an assets folder. You should just be having an assets folder with the background image, the logo, the fab icon, and just a couple of things, right? And yeah, we're good to go, okay? So that's pretty much it. Just let us know if you have any questions with setting up, and we can move on, right? So let's actually take these concepts to the code editor. So as it's installing, just feel free to watch this right now, and you should be able to code along. I mean, not code along, but just watch what we're doing. It's really not that deep right now. Okay, it's really simple. Okay, cool. So I mean, just before getting started, right? Just a few things to note. So the first thing is file naming, right? So when you're naming your files, right, just make sure to keep it lowercase or like, if you want to keep it uppercase, keep it uppercase, but like be consistent, stick to one thing. Okay. We normally recommend, so Stephanos is asking, do we need any extension? That is correct, Stephanos. You do need an extension. It's actually called live server extension. So what you do is, once you have your VS Code open, I'm happy to go through this again once you guys have it installed. You can see that there's this extensions tab, right? And what you do is you search for something called live server. Okay. And you can just install this live server extension. So live server just allows you to save your file and then it'll automatically reload your HTML for you. So that's the only advantage of using the live server. Otherwise, it's okay if you do not want to install this. But yeah, this is basically what you'll need. Okay. Awesome. So moving back to the file naming here. So what I want to do is I just want to remove this tab, and I just want to place it over here. And then I just want to stay in present mode. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, guys, just with file naming, just keep your files, keep your file names short. Please use descriptive meanings. Like, I know in the starting, it might be a little like admin to create file names and be like, yo, what should I call this? Let me just call it like test.html or page4.html, but please don't do that. Just give it like a valuable meanings, right? Just have descriptive meanings. For example, if you want to write the about us page, write the about us code, just call it about.html, right? Don't call it like page4.html, basically. Simple basics. Also, just don't use spaces, right? So if it's about us, right? Don't use like about and then space us. Just use hyphens or use an underscore, about-us.html, okay? It just makes life a whole lot easier, because sometimes when you're trying to point to a certain file, which we'll dive into, it's called relative paths and all that. You might have a few issues if you have a space, right? So just always have underscores or hyphens, and yeah, keep it simple. It just helps also when you're collaborating with people. It just helps with reading the code and understanding what code is in what file, right? So here's some tips on file organizing. So the main folder is normally the root folder, right? So in our project, for example, over here, if I go to the file explorer, this here, the Netflix DSC UK, this over here is basically my root folder. So this is where my project is going to live, right? That's what it means, okay? And then index.html, it's what's used for the home or root file. And it's usually in the root folder, not the subfolders. So normally, like as your project gets bigger, you might end up having so many folders, right? It'll become much more relevant then, but just something to keep in your mind. Just make sure that the index.html is in your root folder, okay? You can put pages in subfolders, and you can have an assets folder for images, which is exactly what we've done, right? So if we wanted, we could have just put all the images in one place, right? But then the thing is, it'll get messy, okay? So it's around file structure. Like as the project gets bigger, like if you have a small project, file structure doesn't matter too much. But as the project gets bigger, it can get very confusing if you do not have a good file structure, okay? So these are just a few tips to keep in mind while Visual Studio Code installs and stuff for you guys right now. Cool. So let us talk about the file structure, right? So what I'll do now is I'm going to head over to my code editor. And as I said, like we need to have an index.html, which is the starting point of any project, right? Any web development project in your root folder. So our root folder is our Netflix DSC UK. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new file, okay? And I'm going to call it index.html, okay? So you can see that index.html is in my root right now, okay? And basically, what we can do now is we can actually start off by writing some code, right? So if you just name it index.html and you type the exclamation mark like that, you'll see a drop down that appears over here. It says emit abbreviation, right? So what you can do is you can hit enter. So I've just typed the exclamation mark and I'm gonna hit enter now. And then you can see a whole bunch of code just pops up, right? So what's happening here is Visual Studio Code has a default extension called Emmet, and it allows you to access template code like this. And if we ever want to write elements, like if we want to type elements, for example, if I want to use H1, it'll just pop up like that. If I want to use an anchor, it'll pop up like that, right? So it just it's very convenient, right, to use Emmet. I mean, to use Visual Studio Code specifically, because it makes your development a whole lot faster, right? So this code that you're seeing here is basically the generic file structure of any HTML file, right? So you'll see that at the top over here, we have something called doc type. Okay, let's talk about doc type, right? So this exclamation mark doc type HTML tag, right? So normally it's added at the top of every HTML file document, right? And what it does, the job is to just tell the browser that, hey, like whatever code is in this file is just an HTML5 file. Okay, that's the job. Okay, the reason why we need this is because HTML has gone through many iterations. There was like HTML1, HTML2, and this is important. It just specifies the version. Okay. Now, then after that, inside our file, you can see that we have this HTML tag, opening tag, and then we have this closing HTML tag. So this basically HTML element, right?
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, but someone asked, what does a Docker do in the chat?
Yeah, I'll be responding to that in a bit.
Yeah.
Something unrelated to HTML CSS. So I'm responding.
Okay, cool. So Arjut, you got that? Will you?
Yeah, I got that.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, Docker is not really related to what we're doing right now. Just for a little more advanced stuff, like just containerization, and just making sure that your code works the same way in different environments. I mean, like Harjot can probably dive into more details by typing some more info in the chat. But yeah, that's just the gist of Docker. But yeah, basically HTML just tells the browser that only HTML is written in between these tags, right? So again, it's kind of redundant because doctype.html and HTML is kind of similar. But the job of HTML is just to say that whatever is inside this element is HTML code, right? And it acts like the root of the document, okay? So if we move on, right? So we talked about doc type, we talked about HTML, just a few admin things, and then we have this thing called head, right? So this is where it gets a little interesting, okay? So head is basically not visible in the browser, right? So whatever we put in our head, right? So whatever elements we put in our head, it sounds so weird, but whatever elements we put inside the head element, right, don't really appear in the web page, right? It's more like a brain, okay? It contains these meta tags of essential information. So for example, if you want to link to like, a database, right, just with pure vanilla HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right, you would have to add that information inside of the head, right? You would have to add meta tags. In fact, we'll be using a few meta tags to link it to styles, right? And it's just to give it additional information, right? So it's hidden from the website, but it's extremely critical. You can import fonts, you can import Bootstrap, you can import libraries, and all that information is normally done inside the head, okay? So yeah, it's like a brain, it's hidden, but it's really important to coding. It's really important for controlling, right, the website. Inside the head, you'll see that we have something called title, right? Now, the title is basically the one thing that kind of appears on our website, but not in the body, but like at the top in the tab, right? So if I just save this file, okay, so I just did Command S, you can use Control S, and you can save the file. And then if you right click on this and open with live server, just make sure that you have the live server extension installed. If you do not have the live server extension installed, it's totally cool. What you can do is you can just open this index.html, right? And you can drag and drop it. Okay, let me just, what you can do is you can literally just drag and drop it like that. Okay, and you'll see that it's an empty document. We do not have anything here, but the one thing that we have is up here, you can see that it says document, right? That is the title. The title just gives the name to the tab, all right? So that's basically that. Now let's do the first thing for our Netflix project, right? So let's make the tab name the same, right? So the first thing is I'm just going to right click on this Netflix site, right? So you can just open netflix.com, just please sign out so that you can see the landing page. You probably won't be able to see the landing page if you're still signed in. What you can do is you can right click, right? Yeah. And once you right click, you can click on view page source. Okay. And this is a cool thing about using Chrome. I know some of you might be using different browsers. I definitely recommend you to use Chrome. Really convenient for web development. And you can see that we have a whole bunch of stuff over here. It looks like garbage, but this is what's powering the site. And what I'll do is I'm gonna do Control F or Command F, and I'm just gonna say title. Okay. And I'm just looking for this title really that says Netflix Kenya, watch TV shows online. Yeah, so I'm just going to copy whatever is between that title tag, opening tag and closing tag. I'm going to place it in our document. I'm going to hit save. And now if I just make this a bit smaller, go back to our site. I did hit save. Oh, that's because I've not opened with live server right now. If I refresh, right? So if you have opened it manually like this, if you just do Control R and refresh, you can see that it shows the updated change there. What I'll do though is I just want to open up live server so that I don't have to keep refreshing the page. Yeah, you'll see that it creates some sort of opens up some sort of port so that we can make the changes dynamically now. Right, so you can see that the title says Netflix Kenya. If I just remove that and save it, come back over here, you can see that the page is reloading and it says Netflix only. I just removed Kenya. Okay, but I'm just going to leave it with Netflix Kenya. You guys can put whatever appears in your browser, depending on whatever region you're in. And yeah, that's basically what the title is. Okay, and inside the head, we have all this brainy information, and we will be adding more meta tags. Just to make the website access certain libraries, certain modules. And yeah, let us move on, okay? And then we have the body, right? So body is actually the main place where we'll be typing a lot of our code most of the time. It's basically where all the content goes. So if we want to add headings, if we want to add paragraphs, whatever HTML elements are there, which we'll be covering just a few elements, basics to get started, everything goes in the body, okay? Now let's start off with writing a few elements, okay? So the first thing is headings and paragraphs. Headings normally denote hierarchy and page structure, right? So what that basically means is that like if you can have like a heading H1, which will be like the main heading, and then you can have subtitles, and then you can have subtitles, and so on. So you can have 6 levels of hierarchy. So there's H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Now if you do H7, you won't get any error, right? But that really doesn't make sense. Don't do that because H6 is the main headings, right? So H1 is the biggest font, H2 is the second biggest, and the font size changes accordingly. But we can style these to whatever needs we have, okay? So what I'll do now is I want to add these elements, okay, inside our body. So I'll just go to the Netflix landing page. I'm going to enable styles. And you can see that this is what the Netflix landing page looks like. I'm going to grab this title over here. So there's unlimited movies, TV shows, and more. I'm going to add it there. Actually, I just added it there, but it needs to be between the H1 element, right? So I'm just going to type H1, hit enter, and then paste it there. And that is our H1 element. And if I go back to our site, right, and hit save on my file, you'll see that our heading appears, and this is what it looks like right now. But basically that's H1. Okay, really simple, guys. That is your first line of code that we've added into our Netflix project. I'm gonna close that. And then what I'll do is I'll also just add H2 over here. So that's watch anywhere, cancel anytime. Similar to what we did with H1. I'm going to tap H2, emit abbreviation, hit enter, paste it in there, put it in one line, hit save, okay? And that's basically H2, right? And then we have ready to watch, enter your email to create or restart your membership and so on. And then I'm just gonna create H3 again and then paste it in there. And there we go, okay? So it's as simple as that, guys, if you want to get started, right? So it doesn't look very special right now, but we're adding our elements right now slowly, and we'll be styling it, we'll be rearranging it in future, okay? So yeah, those are headings, okay? Now if we move on, there's also paragraphs, right? Now paragraphs are like the regular text. There is no hierarchies in paragraph. It's just P for paragraph, the P tag, right? So there's no P1, P2, P3, and so on. It's just P tag, okay? And what we can do is, let's see, does Netflix have any P tags? This looks like a nice P tag to use. So what I'll do is I'm going to create another thing down here. I'm going to call it P. I'm going to paste it in there. And you can see that this is what the P tag looks like. I'm also just going to say enjoy your TV. I'm just going to add that element. So it looks like there's some structure here. I'm going to save that. And then we'll see, let's see what a P tag looks like. So you can see this is what the P tag looks like, right? So we have this watch on smart TVs, PlayStation, Xbox, and so on. Okay. So this is basically like, using H1, H2, H3, and then the P tag for paragraph. Okay. Awesome. So it's as simple as that, guys. That's just HTML, just to get started. And yeah, I just can't emphasize this enough. I think this is VS Code is like really special. A lot of developers, I think, is the most preferred code editor out there. It closes all the tags for you, as I showed you just now. It auto completes for you. So if you just type H, it'll give you like a whole bunch of options. You'll see the power of VS Code, especially in CSS. You don't have to remember different elements. Like, it'll just give you a bunch of options, right? And yeah, it also sets up the initial code for you. Thank you, Emmett. And then it's also really easy to comment code and move blocks around. So we'll talk more about that in the coming slides, which commenting and all that sort of stuff, right? So the next thing is the strong element, strong versus emphasis. So we're just diving into a little more HTML here, taking things a little slow. I hope you guys are able to keep up. Basically, we have strong and emphasis, right? So these are also like elements, like, how we had headings and paragraph, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, and then we also have the P tag, and then we also have strong, and then we have M, right? So strong basically just writes text in bold in your browser, right? Now you can also use B, right? The B tag to write text in bold, but then strong is more, it has more semantic importance, right? So it has more semantic meaning to it. So the browser understands that you want to give some importance to a certain text in a paragraph or somewhere, right? So it just tells the browser that some really important text is in this element between strong, right? So let's actually make some text strong, right? So let's make PlayStation over here strong, right? So when I say strong, I just want it to be in bold. And you can see that it automatically closed the tag for me, but I just want it to be after PlayStation. I'm going to save that. And then you can see now PlayStation's become strong. So the browser understands that we're placing some sort of importance on the word PlayStation, right? Then we have EM, which is emphasis, stands for emphasis. It basically writes text in italics in the browser, okay? So it emphasizes on a certain text between these tags, right? So similar to what we've just done with PlayStation, let's make like a Chromecast italics, right? So what I'll do is I'm just gonna use the EM opening tag, and then it'll automatically close it for me. And then after Chromecast, I'm going to paste EM there and hit save, right? And then you'll see that Chromecast is now italics, right? So it's as simple as that, guys. HTML, we just went through H1, H2, H3, wrote another H1 tag, wrote a paragraph. Inside the paragraph, we made some text bold using the strong element. We made some text italics using the emphasis element. And yeah, so moving on. Just a pointer for strong and EM. So if you observed, right, we actually put strong inside our P tag, right? So this means that it's actually an inline element, right? So it has to be within the P tag, right? You cannot put strong smart TVs, like strong and then smart TVs and then the strong outside the P tag over here. It's not going to work, right? It's not going to do what you expect it to do. Okay. So these are inline elements normally used within paragraphs to make certain text italic or certain text, italic or bold. Okay. Now moving on, right? So we talked about the headings, we talked about the paragraph, we talked about strong emphasis. There's something special called the anchor tag, right? So A is short for anchor, and the job of anchor is to link, right? So when I say link, I mean, if you want to click on a button, right, you want it to redirect to a certain page, right? Now, I'm sure you guys have gone onto websites, and when you go on these websites, you can actually click on a certain, like on the nav bar, you can click on an option like, let's say, about us, and then it'll automatically scroll down to a certain section on the page, right? So use the anchor tag for that as well. So it moves to a different location on the current page, or you can point it to another page, okay? So that's the anchor tag. So in our project, for example, right, we actually have this anchor tag here, right? So there's the sign in button. It looks like a button, but it's actually an anchor tag under the hood. So if I disable the styles, you'll see that it's just an anchor tag, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the anchor tag above the headings and stuff, right? Because it is above the headings. I'm just going to say A, right? I'm actually not going to use emit for this. I'm just going to say sign in, right? Now, if I click on sign in, right? If I open my project, you see we'll have sign in here. But then like, if I want to click on it, I really can't do anything with this right now. All right, I want it to open up in a new browser. I want not new browser, in a new page. I want the sign in option to appear there, right? So how Netflix does it, if I click on sign in, they just open this login page, right? They open it in the same place, right? Normally in my projects, I like to open things in the new page so that like in a new tab. So for example, if I click on sign in over here and hold the control or command button, and it'll open in a new tab like that. I'd like that to happen normally, and it opens in a new tab like this, right? So you can see that the anchor tag doesn't do what we want right now. Like it's totally useless. It just looks like a normal text, right? Now, in order to give this functionality, we need to know about a certain concept called attributes, right? So in HTML, some elements like the anchor tag, like the anchor element, has something called attributes, right? So attributes basically give extra information to a certain tag, right? So for example, for the anchor tag, if we wanted to point to a certain page, right, we would give that extra information inside the anchor tag, right? So using an attribute, we would give it the extra information, right? So this attributes are also used with like images, and if you do like things like React, if you do Angular, you'll see that attributes are extremely powerful. You can add attributes to any element, and with JavaScript, you can access these attributes, and then you can like add HTML in between elements, and you can do a whole bunch of manipulation with JavaScript. That's where attributes are very, very useful and very powerful, right? So you can see that over here we have this anchor element. So here's an example. And then we have this thing called href, right? So href just basically means that you're pointing to a certain place. So when you click on the sign in button, you want it to open up this page, right? This netflix.com login page, right? And normally the syntax for writing attributes are followed with an equal sign. So like the href attribute, so we call this the href attribute, has an equal sign. And then we have like an opening quotation mark, a closing quotation mark, and then we can add information in there, right? So let's actually create our attribute, right? So what I'll do now is inside sign in over here, I'm going to close that. I'm going to remove that. I'm just going to type A, hit enter, and then you can see that Visual Studio Code has given me exactly what elements are there, right? So you can see I'd like to actually redirect to the login page, right, when it's clicked on. So inside href, I'm just going to paste that link, the link that I got from the login page over here on Netflix login page. And then if I hit save and go back to our project, what's going on? Oh, actually I haven't put any words inside. So I'm just going to say sign in, hit save. You can see that the sign in appears up there now. If I click on it, it'll open up the Netflix landing page. So that's actually our first, legit kind of functionality that's probably not going to change throughout the course of this project, So that's basically the anchor tag. It gives you this additional information. The href attribute gives it additional information so that the browser knows what to do with that element, right? Now, some elements actually require attributes, right? So a link won't work without the href attribute, right? It won't do what you want, okay? And also something important about link, the href attribute specifically and the anchor tag is that it will not work if it doesn't have the HTTP or the HTTPS, right? It's really important that you ensure that you use the HTTPS. So if you actually go to this site over here, you can see that if I click out of it, it doesn't actually show HTTPS, but if I click in there and copy it and paste it in my browser, you see that we have access to HTTPS, right? So that it normally comes directly. I think this lock sign already, it indicates that it's just secure, but basically we copy this link to have access to HTTPS, okay? Great, and that is known as the absolute path, right? So this is the absolute path. If we want to open the Netflix like sign-in page, we use the absolute path of that sign-in link, right? So that when we click on the sign-in button, it opens that page, okay? So the absolute path is where we specify the external link. Now, a cool thing you can also do in your project is you can point to files within your project, okay? So yeah, so let's actually do a demo of how we can point. So this absolute path actually points to a file that is like points to some sort of points to this login page that is outside of our project, right? What you can do is if you create a new file, right? So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it about-us.html. And then inside about.us, again, I'm going to use emmet, hit enter. I'm going to say Netflix about us, and then inside the body, I'm just going to add an h1 tag and say about us page, okay? Hit save, and then now what I'll do is inside my index.html at the bottom over here, because we'll probably delete this later on, I'm going to create an href, right? And I'm just going to point to about us.html. And you can see VS Code is recognizing what I'm trying to do, right? And if I hit save, okay, and open our project, we'll see the anchor appear here. So you can see About Us appears here. And if I click on About Us, it just opens the Netflix About Us page, right? So you can also point to, so I see a question, I don't see any files being imported in the HTML file. So where are the fonts and font size rules imported from? How does it know the heading? Okay, yeah, don't worry about that. We'll basically be covering that in the CSS section. We will be getting our styles from Google Fonts. So don't worry about all that information for now, okay? Now Emmet is, you don't really need to know how to use Emmet per se. It just comes with VS Code and it just makes your life while you're coding HTML a lot simpler, right? So you can, just a few tricks, as I showed already, if you type H1 and hit enter, it automatically completes it for you. So those are a few tricks. If you type the exclamation mark and hit enter, it creates this template code for you. Okay. So those are just a few things you can do with it. And then you saw right now, we use the anchor tag to actually point to the about us file, right? That is in our current project. Okay. So you can use the anchor tag for that as well. Okay. So basically that is called the relative path because we're pointing to a file that is within our project. Okay. We're pointing to files locally in our project. So now if we want to visit the about us page, right? We just literally put the name about us and we actually added it there, right? Now don't worry about this image. We'll be covering that in a bit. So Rory, you don't have to install Emmet. Yeah, it does come in the box. So yeah, you could use tab, like exclamation and tab or exclamation and enter should work. Yeah, awesome. So basically this image tag, don't worry about that. It does require an attribute as well, called the source attribute. We'll be covering that in a bit. And yeah, the above is how to create an image pointing to a local file, right? So this is how we would create the image. And then you can see there's this fancy like, dot / and then there's like assets and then bgimage.jpg. So this basically allows you to point to a certain file, okay? So let's actually create the image, right? So as the name suggests, guys, like we'll be covering this in a little more detail in a bit, but as the name suggests, image just allows you to place an image inside your project, right? Yay, Rory got it working. Awesome, Rory, great stuff. So what you can do is you can type img, right? So img stands for image in HTML, and then you can hit enter or tab, and then you'll see that it's asking for source, and then it's asking for alt, right? So inside source, I don't want to, you can actually use an absolute path. You can point it to a link separate to this project, or you can do point it to like, this background image that I have already over here, right? So what I'll do is I'll say dot slash. So what that basically means is the dot stands for the current directory I'm in. So when I say directory, the current folder. So currently the index.html is inside the root folder. So when I do dot slash, it's saying that inside this root folder, right? When you say slash, it means that you want to go inside it. You want to go inside a certain file inside this root folder. You want to enter the assets folder. So hit assets, right? You hit enter on assets. And you want to import, you have the option to import all these different images. I just want to import BG image, okay? And if I hit save, let's see what happens in our project. So I just want to go back to our index.html and what's going on? There you go. So you can see that our image appears, right? And you can see that we also have some spacing over here, which we'll be covering in CSS, okay? But basically, that is how we would use the relative path, right? So dot means like from the current directory, if you do dot slash, it allows you to enter a certain directory. I'm using it interchangeably like a folder, right? And if you do dot slash assets, it'll allow you to enter assets. Inside assets, you have BG image. And yeah, that is basically how you would use relative paths, right? So right here in this example, we have the absolute path over here, which is with HTTPS, and then we have a relative path over here, just with dot slash, okay? Great, so let's continue. Yeah, so the dot means it's in the current folder, slash assets allows us to access files inside assets, then the name of the file we want to point to, okay? So we basically just covered all the stuff in a practical manner. And yeah, as I said, guys, like in my projects, I really like opening information in new tabs, right? I don't like if I'm building an app and like there's a link on the app, I don't want it to disrupt the user experience in the sense that I don't want the current page to disappear, right? So what I like is if I click on an anchor tag, I like it to open in a new tab, right? So how you would do that is you have an attribute called target, which is an optional attribute, and if you type _blank, HTML will understand that when you click on this anchor element, you want it to point to a new tab, right? You want it to open in a new tab, right? So, for example, let us add this to the about us tag, and you can see that Visual Studio Code is allowing me to it recognizes that I'm trying to type target. If I hit enter, it opens up the quotes for me, and I can just say _blank. And if I hit save and come down here inside our about us, if I click on it, see it opens in a new tab, right? So it opens in a new tab, the user experience is intact, a really nifty trick. I really like to add this to my projects, okay? So yeah, the image element, we briefly went over this right now. So there's something you'll observe in the image element actually, right? So every element on this page actually has an opening tag and a closing tag, except this weird doc tag string at the top, except the image tag, right? The image tag actually is self-closing. It's called self-closing because we don't have to add any information between tags. That's why it's self-closing, right? So for an image, you're just pointing to a certain location. You're pointing to a certain image, or you're pointing to an external image from a third party. And that's basically where all that's why it's self-closing, okay? So that's just something to note. It's actually used quite frequently, and you don't have to have an image opening tag and a closing tag, okay? So images use the source attribute, which is short for source, right? So SRC attribute, which is short for source, okay? So the SRC is similar to href, but the only thing is that now you're just specifying what file you're pointing to. You could point to a local file, or you could point to a file that is in the project. So right now over here, we imported this Netflix image that was already in our project, right? But if you want, because Netflix often changes its images, look, the image is different. Like last time we did, the image is different. Now the background image is different, right? So things are always changing. What you can do is you can inspect. Let me see if I can find this really quickly. I'm sure. So what I've done is I've just inspected, and then you can see that I have access to this big link over here, the SRC link, and I could just use that path, right? So instead of this, what I can do is I can just paste it like that. I can hit save, and then we'll see that we're going to use the updated image, right? Is it using the updated image? I guess it is. Yeah, I guess it is here. Let's open this in a new tab and let's see what's going on. So I could literally paste the link in a tab like that, because essentially it's just pointing to some sort of file, right? And looks like it's working. Yeah, I guess it's working. Yeah, it is working, but it's like really massive. Okay. Which can be fixed with by using CSS. Okay. So the point I'm trying to get across over here is you can use like relative and absolute paths inside image as well. Okay. But I'm just going to stick to the background image that we already had. Okay. For sake of simplicity, so you guys can follow along nicely. And yeah, it can be relative or it can be absolute. Okay. The paths can be relative or absolute. So image, very similar to the anchor tag, but except with the image tag, you have the source attribute. With the anchor tag, you have the href attribute, right? So that's the difference. So if you observe in our image, we actually have something called the alt attribute, right? This alt attribute actually came when we just hit enter, right? And the alt attribute is just basically used to describe the image, right? And now this is really important because for people who cannot see, right? For people who are disabled in that manner, they will have screen readers, right? So screen readers will basically read whatever is in the alt attribute. So that's why it's really important to always have something relevant in the alt attribute, so that, like, you know, your app is friendly, like it's user friendly for all audiences, right? There's no exclusion. Okay. So yeah, the alt attribute describes the intent of an image. It can be empty, like as you saw over here, the image still loaded, like even though it's empty. But what I'll do is I'm going to say Netflix background. Okay. We actually won't be using this, right? I think this will actually be, we'll be using this directly from CSS, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. Okay.
Makil, maybe I should add on something. For those who are doing digital marketing or they're looking into go learn SEOs, how to market your website even further, this alt attribute is very important because it tells the search engine, tells Google what exactly that image is in the website. Because remember, a search engine cannot read an image, right? We have to tell the search engine that this image shows this particular thing. And that's how it helps in terms of SEO, search engine optimization.
Yeah, guys, SEO extremely powerful, especially in the age we are in right now, like with the pandemic happening and everything. Like your online presence is extremely important, and SEO is helpful with that. So you want to put your name like everywhere on your site. For example, here we're saying Netflix background. So like the logo is always going to be there. So like if you type Netflix on Google, right? It'll put it higher in the rankings and it'll appear at the top. But I mean, Netflix has probably nailed their SEO. So yeah, it's a different conversation. And yeah, so basically the image element, guys, it's similar to the anchor element. It requires an attribute, but instead of the href attribute, it requires the src attribute. And the other thing is that it's self-closing, okay? Nothing too complicated. Just think about the practical aspects, right? So yeah, the next thing is lists, right? So we have different options for lists. Okay, so we can have a regular bulleted list, or we can have a numbered list, right? So normally lists are used on a lot of pages. Like I think Netflix uses lists as well. We'll go check it out right now. But it's used for navigation, right? So inside your headers, you can have lists, right? But you can restyle it. You can remove the bullets. You can put it in a horizontal line and so on. Okay, so that's basically how lists are used. It's used for organizing content as well. So for example, let me give an example of Instagram. So if you open the Instagram app, right, you can see a bunch of posts, right? So the post could actually be loaded using the lists element, right? So the lists element, of course, it can be restyled and so on, but it can be loaded as a list. That's an option. Netflix probably doesn't do that, but that is basically an option of how you can load like certain lists, okay? So lists, extremely powerful. There are two types of lists. There's the ordered lists, and then there's the unordered lists, right? So ordered lists, as the name suggests, you know, it could be numbered, it could be alphabetical, it could be Roman numbered, you know. And then unordered list just puts it in bullet points. You can also change the style of the bullets and so on using CSS, okay? So let us actually create this, right? So what I'll do is inside our Netflix page, first thing is I'm going to disable the styles again. So brace yourselves for the eyesore. And I'm going to scroll down to the footer, and you can see the footer has all these different tags, right? So this is what the footer looks like right now. What I'll do is let's actually add it over here above the about us anchor element. I'm just going to say UL, right? UL, hit enter, opens up these elements for me. And then LI, LI stands for list item, okay? And then inside list item, I can have FAQ, okay? And if I hit save now and go to our site, scroll to the bottom, you can see that we have FAQ, okay? So similarly, we can actually import everything, okay? So let us actually get everything here. I'm going to paste everything there. It's not going to look pretty. And then what I can do is I can type, oh wait, I have a shortcut here. Huh? I think it was Alt, and then yeah. So guys, what you can do actually is I have all these different options here, like Help Center. I just pretty much copied this from Netflix, and you can create multiple cursors. Like if you click your Alt button, right? Hold your Alt button on your keyboard, and then using your trackpad, you can like click on the different places where you want the cursor to appear. So you can have multiple cursors. So I'm basically just clicking in all the different places I want the cursor to appear. And now you can see that I have a whole bunch of cursors over here. And now what I'll do is I'm going to open the LI element, and then I want it to actually be at the end, right? So I pushed it to the end, and then I'm going to paste it like that. Then I'm going to hit save, and then hit escape, right? And you can see that it was like a quick way of just adding all the information. Now, if I come back to Netflix, you can see that all our elements are there, right? And now if I just change this to OL, right? So that was UL, unordered list. So it just put bullets. If I change it to OL, let's see what happens. You can see that now it's become an ordered list. It's numbered, right? But let's just stick to UL because that's what we need, right? And yeah, that's pretty much it with the different kinds of lists that we have. And I think commenting code, guys, extremely important, you know, especially if you're collaborating, like also for yourselves, like when you're writing code, sometimes it might make a lot of sense to you. You know, it's like, it's pretty obvious you're just writing some code, it makes sense to you. And then later on, you might end up like really confused about what you were trying to do, what was your thought process. And then like if you hand over your code to someone else, they might also be confused about what you were doing in a certain block of code, which is why, you know, commenting is really helpful. Makes your code look elegant. It gives you know, it helps developers actually understand the code a whole lot faster, right? So for example, this could be like in the footer. So if for VS Code, if you do command / or control /, it'll automatically give you the commenting tags. And then you can just say, you know, this is like the footer, right? And then here I'm just going to say comment, and this like the banner wrap. So the banner wrap basically has all these different elements. And then this is like, you know, the info container, right? So the info container has enjoy your TV, watch smart TVs, and so on, right? So, and what you can do is like, sometimes if you're writing code and you might want to just comment some code out. So like you want the code to still be there. You don't want to like, you know, backspace it and remove it. What you can do is you can comment it out like that. So the code is still there. You just put your cursor on that line and hit command / or control /, and then it's going to comment it out for you like that. And you can see that the about us has disappeared. And then if I ever need it again in future, I could just bring it back like that and hit save, okay? So that's a nifty trick. Code commenting, extremely powerful, makes your code look a whole lot cleaner, really helps with collaboration. So just to sum up, like, all the basics of HTML that we've covered so far. Firstly, use VS Code. Can't emphasize that. Huge advocate for it. Headings, we've done headings. You have hierarchy, it denotes hierarchy. So you can have H1 to H6, and then you can have the P tag for paragraph. And then you can make your text bold. You can give it some sort of importance, some sort of relevance. You can make text italic using the EM tag. And then you can also reuse the anchor tag to point to elements, right? So that's the anchor tag. And the anchor tag uses the href attribute to give it the path, right? So it either gives it a relative path, so you can point to a file in your project, or you can give it an absolute path and point to a link outside of your project, okay? Yeah, so absolute paths are used to point to external links. Relative paths are used to point to local locations. Image elements are self-closing, really similar to the anchor element, and it only uses this src attribute, right? Instead of the href attribute, okay? Yeah, and code can be commented in HTML using this syntax, right? So it's the opening angle bracket. Like, personally speaking, I don't even remember this. I literally just go and type command /, okay? And that's it, guys. That brings us to the end of the HTML section. I hope you guys were able to keep up. It was really basic, and this is what we have so far. Nothing like Netflix yet. We're very similar to Netflix without the styles. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Akil, do you want to just go through how you did that the alt thing and you created multiple cursors? Because I think it's not working out for some people.
Okay. Yeah, guys. I mean, this is not really a necessity. You could use this like as a shortcut, right? So what I'll do is I'll just put this. I'll create a new thing below over here, and then I have this one cursor here, and then I can, if you have Mac, use Alt or the Option button. It says Alt Option. It's like that button right there next to Command. If it's Windows, I think it's just Alt, right? And yeah, you can basically use this, and you can click in all these different places with your mouse. So you keep holding it, and then you can click in different places. You can click like all over your project like that. And then you can just type random stuff like that in multiple places at once, okay? Yeah, I hope that makes sense. But it's not really important, guys. It's just a fancy trick to write code in many places at once. Cool. So Harjot, how are we doing for time? DSC
We've got
leads.
15 minutes. I think
Okay.
we can take some questions, and then I can maybe just introduce CSS. And yeah, I think then we can close off for today.
Great.
Continue the
So
workshop.
yeah, guys, do you have any questions so far with what we've done so far? Really basic stuff. For those of you who are advanced, this was probably really boring, but for those of you who are starting out, I hope this was like helpful. Oh yeah, break time. We have this little thing over here. We can like spend like a minute or two on this. So yeah, tell us about your craziest celebrity encounter, right? So I know this is really random. We just thought it'll be fun to hear different experiences. Someone from the US batch actually like poured some sort of food on top of Bruno Mars guitar and stuff, which was really funny. So they like people have had weird experiences. So Stephanos is asking, when is the next part? Yeah, the next part is Saturday. But guys, please don't leave yet. We do still have a few more things to cover. We're just taking a small break right now.
Yeah, I think it's another 10 minutes of work.
Yeah,
and
so it's,
yeah, we can wrap up.
yeah, so I mean, like, let's just actually skip this break stuff. Let's actually jump into the basics. So what I'll do is I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now.
Actually, you need to push your code before you stop sharing.
Okay, great. Is my screen still being shared?
Yeah, I can see yours.
Okay, awesome. So what I'll do first is I'm just gonna push my code. So don't worry about what's happening right now. I'm just collaborating with Harjot.
So look behind you, says, I met Simon Cowell once at Pride of Britain Awards, and he was surprisingly tall.
He's a tall man, seriously? Lit. Awesome.
Okay, have you pushed?
Yeah, I have pushed the code.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen now.
Great, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna get to what Akhil has pushed. So I'm just gonna quickly get his code.
So Alexei is actually asking, when are we going to get to the back end? Will we be using Go, PHP, or something else? So for this particular series, we're not doing a back end. It's purely front end UI based stuff. I mean, like in future, we could do back end. Like we normally use Firebase for like quick prototyping using JavaScript. But it's a little out of scope right now. We just want to focus on the styles. Eddie says that I was once too shy to join a conversation with Sigourney Weaver. And then Shantanu Awasti says, I was standing next to Anthony Joshua outside Buckingham Palace, but I didn't realize until 2 hours later. Oh, I actually had a similar experience. Like I was actually traveling to Cape Town, and in the airport, like in the business class, right? I was just passing the business class. Like, you know how if you're in economy, you got to pass the business class. I actually saw this guy who looked really familiar. He was chilling there like with 3 iPhones, and I was like, who the hell is this guy? He looks really similar. I mean, he looks really familiar. And like 4 days later, I saw him in a movie, and I was like, dude, this guy's a celebrity who's actually in movies. And I missed a chance to take an autograph with him. And like over the past few years, he's become so famous. It's really crazy. It's really crazy. Yeah, rip.
Awesome, man. Cool. I think we can get started. We only have another 10 minutes. I just want to quickly blaze through the CSS. So as Akhil introduced, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It's not a programming language. It's actually a styling language. It brings beauty to a basic HTML page. So whatever Akhil's been doing is the boring stuff. Let me bring you the cool stuff now. Make the pages look cooler. So we'll be going through the basic syntax, selectors, how do you add CSS into an HTML page, and the various properties of CSS. So let me just get started with the declaration, how exactly it works. So when you open up, okay, sorry about this. Let me just open up the code editor. So when you open up the HTML page over here, you won't see any styling or anything. And you can add that styling by using the following syntax. So there's actually a selector which selects the tags that are in the HTML page. So Akhil created H1, H2 tags. So the selector basically focuses on that specific tag. And then we have the declaration, which is inside a curly bracket. And the declaration is basically the CSS property. This is where you define CSS properties. And you can define multiple properties inside the curly brackets by separating them with a semicolon. And this declaration basically have a property. So for example, if you want a font color to change to blue, you'll define the property color and change it to blue. You want to change the font size. I remember there's a question earlier where someone asked, how do you change the font size? How do you know H1 has this specific size? You can declare it using CSS, using this following syntax. So how do you exactly add CSS into HTML? There are actually 3 ways you can do that. There's actually inline CSS, internal CSS, and external CSS. I'll be going through all of them. Inline CSS are basically styles that are defined inside the HTML attribute, inside a style attribute. And how you do this is you go to the HTML page, HTML document, and pick any tag. Let's style H1. I'll use the style attribute and change the color to blue. So the property is color and the value is blue. And when I save this, I've opened it with live server. You can see it automatically changes the color to blue. So that's how you define inline CSS. And you usually use this only if you want to apply the style to that specific element in HTML. Sometimes you probably want to reuse the style again and again. You can't do this with inline style. It's very redundant, and it's actually not good practice. You do want to mix CSS with HTML, especially when the project gets bigger and bigger. You do want to mix CSS with HTML. The code just gets very messy. Then the second way is internal CSS, and this is basically defined inside the head element, and you create a style tag inside the head element and put all your CSS code inside it. So for example, I'm going to go to the HTML page. Inside the head element, I'm going to create a style tag, a style element. And inside this style element, I'm basically going to use what we did earlier over here. So I'm going to use the selector. I want all the H1 would be a nice example because they are two H1s. So I'm just going to remove the inline style, make sure there's no blue color here. And I'm going to add that styling here. So I'm going to select H1 and open curly brackets. And inside the curly brackets, I want the color to be, let's say, red. The cool thing about CSS is it already has default colors. So you can, these primary colors like red, green, black, they all are inside CSS, but you can define it using hex, like different ways of coding up color. So there's, I think, RGB and hex. So let me save this, and there you go. All the color changes to red. How cool is that? But you only use this when you want to apply the style to that specific HTML page, which is very unlikely these days because you have multiple pages. You usually don't have one single HTML page unless it's some sort of portfolio or something, but still you'll have multiple HTML pages. So we won't be using internal CSS. It's unlikely that you'll be using that as well, but we'll be using external CSS. So external CSS is basically a file. It's an external file outside of the HTML file where you add all the CSS code into, and you link that with the HTML page using the link element inside the header section. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to head over to head, and actually before that, let me actually create a CSS file. So inside the Netflix page folder, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to right click, new file. I'll call that styles.css. So the .css is basically refers to a CSS file, and that creates a new CSS file. And then inside the header, the head element, I'm going to create a link tag. So if I type link, yeah, if I type link, it automatically detects that I want to create the image. Automatically detects I want to create a link element. So once I click enter, you will be able to see this. So REL stands for relationship. It defines the relationship that I want to have with that external file, and href just tells me, allows me to put the path of that specific style, the specific CSS file. So inside href, like a kiltota.absolute, I'm going to use /, and / will tell me all the files inside the folder, the current folder, and I'm going to select styles.css because I want to link the current HTML page with the styles.css. So I'm going to save that. There won't be any difference yet. Nothing's going to happen until we put in some code inside the styles.css. So I'm just going to separate this. I'm going to split it to the left, and my styles.css is on the left. My index.html is on the right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the styles. Actually, let me leave the inline style over here, the internal style. I'm going to create a new style over here. So I'm going to style, let's say H2. So H2, change the font size to something ridiculously big. Make it like 100px, and save it. And there you go. We can see that works. So all the H2s inside the HTML file will have a 100-pixel font size, and you can confirm that by right-clicking on that specific element. Click on inspect. So this is a cool tool by Google Chrome. When you click inspect, you'll be able to see the code that we've coded, and H2 tag actually has a font size of 100 pixels. How cool is that? Cool. And then you can also have multiple style sheets. So sometimes, so when you're creating Netflix or you're creating any website, you usually want it to be optimized for a mobile phone, for a laptop, for different screen sizes, you know? And when you create like a website like Netflix, there can be a lot of CSS. So you don't want to mix CSS for a mobile and CSS for a laptop, you know, a bigger screen size. So you can create two different style sheets. So if you create a new file, I'm going to call that responsive.css. This will contain all the CSS code for a phone, maybe a smaller screen size. And that allows me to attach two different style sheets to the HTML page. And you can do that using the same method. I'm just going to use link again. And the relationship is style sheets, href changes to responsive. One thing to note before we wrap up this is that when you create a style sheet, when you link a style sheet underneath another style sheet, it will basically overwrite the exact same tag on the previous style sheet. For example, if I created H2 over here, and H2 is inside the styles.css, which is above responsive.css, and now if I create another H2 tag here and change the font size to, let's say, something small now, font size to maybe 10 pixels, and save it, you can see that it takes over the previous style sheet. That's why if you notice that some style is being overwritten, just make sure that this link are in order. So if I move this style sheet on top, we'll see the font size should increase, it should change. And there you go, it changes to 100 pixels. I guess we'll continue the rest in the next workshop. We don't have enough time. We did want to cover quite a few things, but I think we can wrap up now. Okay, I think it's time.
Yeah, yeah, super chill.
Awesome, man.
Awesome, guys. So that brings us to the end of this first workshop. I hope this was useful for you. Harjot, do you want to just open the slide that says feedback?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, guys, we covered basics a little bit, like all the basics of HTML, started off with a little CSS. Like if some of the CSS stuff went over your head, it's perfectly fine. We'll be doing a whole lot of CSS. So you'll be very confident with your CSS by the time we're done with this project. So we set up the environment, we did some basics, and then for next steps, we'll basically be deploying this application, we'll be building it up. We'll be doing a whole lot more, it'll become a whole lot more tangible in the coming workshops. Okay, awesome. Yeah, next slide.
I guess next will be, yeah, we'll be creating, we just went over this, yeah. Yeah, feedback.
Yeah, guys, so your feedback would mean the world to us. We have dropped a link to the feedback form on the chat, right? I'm just gonna drop it in there again. Yeah, guys, we survive on feedback. Like all your feedback would mean so much to us, at least for the coming workshops as well, so that we can make it as effective as possible for you. The feedback is extremely helpful. It shouldn't take you longer than a minute to do it. It's literally just a few multiple choices. And if you have any advice or feedback, it might take a little longer. But yeah, it shouldn't take much of your time. Also, yeah, guys, I saw some of you followed me on Instagram and I have followed you guys back. I'd love to get in touch with you guys. If you guys are ever down in SA, South Africa, or you're in Kenya, I'm actually in Kenya right now, please hit me up. Yeah, or in Malawi, we can definitely grab a drink. It'll be great to meet you guys in person. That's one of the cool things about networking. I'm a huge fan. So yeah, those are our Instagram tags. If you haven't followed us yet, please follow us. Would love to grow my network. And down there, you see a small coupon-like thing. This is actually for our web development training program. If you're interested in working with us and becoming part of our training programs, going into detail with all the different concepts, building 30+ projects, it should be very useful for you guys. Actually, Web Dev Plus, actually the second part of the program, is where you can get a guaranteed internship placement as well. So if you're keen in becoming part of our training programs, if you apply with this code, you'll get a £200 discount, right? So definitely consider this. We do also have financial aid options available. because we know COVID has literally done the most to a lot of families. So we do cover the cost significantly, 30%, up to 30%. We've even gone a bit above sometimes to cover the costs. So that's definitely an option if you guys are looking to level up your skills going into 2021. Definitely check out our training programs. And yeah, it'll be great to work with you guys there. But yeah, we are super keen for the next workshop as well. This should be a lot of fun. And hopefully let's get the Netflix project ready so you can add it to your portfolios. Harjot, is there anything else to add?
Maybe last thing to mention about the programs itself, the deadline was actually today. We've extended it to Friday because we're doing this workshop today. So if you'd like to apply, yeah, please apply as soon as possible. We've just extended deadlines for the UK. So yeah.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of this workshop. Guys, do you have any questions for us? In the chat, you can drop it in the chat, or I see Akshay is asking, how would the file know which style to use depending on the size of the device? Yeah, Akshay, that is actually something that we'll be covering. It's using media queries. You can actually specify, you know, what your HTML file needs to look like in a certain size. So you can style for like tablets, you can style for like, you know, mobile devices and so on. So that is something that we'll try to cover, like at least briefly, not in too much detail. But yeah, awesome, great. So we're just gonna chill around like for 3 more minutes, guys. Let us know if you have any questions in the chat. It's been great, super keen for the next one. Yeah, welcome guys. Shout out to George, shout out to Rory, shout out to Akshay, shout out to Eddie, shout out to Shantanu, shout out to Alexei. Awesome guys, thank you so much for coming to the workshop. It was great having you guys here.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot to the DSC team who organized this day. It was really good.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, guys. I hope this stood up to your expectations as DSC leads. Maybe Harjot, you can share some of your experience as a DSC lead and like your expectations from people giving workshops.
Yeah, actually, I actually didn't mention that I was a DSC lead in South Africa. So I basically helped set up the DSC in Cape Town. And I remember Google developers, I applied for it, got accepted, went to the first workshop, I think, not the workshop, the summit, what happened in Nigeria. And they prepped us for all this workshops. That's when like this workshop journey really began, 3 years ago. And since then, we've just been doing a whole lot of workshop. We've been growing, brought that to Zayo. It's been a lot of fun. I remember like the first day, it was just like such a hype on campus. We had around 400-500 people signing up with the club. It was really intense. So yeah, like it's nice to see a lot of engagement happening with such clubs,
Yeah, we used to like give free pizza at our events. So people used to just, and it was at lunchtime, so people used to just come for pizza. They used to hear Google's name, and it was so wild. Oh my gosh.
Good times, eh?
Good times, but COVID, guys, COVID has really snatched that away from us. Awesome. So yeah,
Awesome.
it's 5 past now, and I guess we can end the call here. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. It's been